Why can't you stop people pleasing? We have so much information available to us right now in this world that you can go anywhere and find out so much information on people pleasing, and yet you still find yourself being a people pleaser. I'm Lisa Jane, and I would like to explain to you the underlying dynamics that you may not be aware of that keep you in that people pleasing state. And I also want to give you some suggestions on how you can start changing that. The reason I think this is important, because especially as a woman, the more we are in the role of people pleasing, the less effective that we are because we're not in our power. The less effective we are as a parent. So with our children, if we're trying to people please, or if we have that being driven by our unconscious, this need to keep everyone happy, this need to be emotionally responsible, if we have that as a parent, then it's very hard for us to actually set really effective boundaries with our children, because I know this because I used to do this, right? I would say no to my kids, but because I felt so bad about saying no to them, I would say yes over here somewhere else, just to make up for saying no over here. And so I found myself in this dynamic where it just didn't feel good. And in fact, it didn't serve my kids, because they never learned to be responsible, because I never really held them accountable for certain behaviors or certain choices, because I was trying to sort of make it all nice and soft and, flowery for them. So as a parent, it's very important to be able to see where you people please, why you people please, and to shift out of that state. Because when you're in your authentic power, you're in your heart, nobody's going to argue with that. It comes from this incredible source of strength. And I tell you what, you really need that with kids. It's a coherent state that you can find yourself in. With partners, it's the same. How do you think you might feel after years and years of pleasing a partner, sacrificing, trying to make life happy for them? How are you going to feel about yourself? Every time you walk away from yourself to keep them happy, your sense of self-worth and self-esteem is chipped away. You might not notice it. And I'm not just saying this because I've read it in a textbook. I have experienced this. In my first relationship, it was very codependent. We had a lot of dynamics set up that I was completely unaware of while I was in that relationship. In fact, it wasn't until I got out of that relationship that I realized there is a completely different way of being in a relationship that nobody ever taught me about. And I am pretty passionate right now to start teaching this new way of being in a relationship. I think we should have it in our schools. As young women, we should know that there's an alternative to actually people pleasing, sacrificing ourselves, being yes men, yes women, handing away our power in order to get love or security. That is just so old paradigm, and so needs to shift on our planet in order for men and women to come back into harmony and balance. So I digress though. Back to relationships. How do you think, if your relationship is based on keeping them happy and people pleasing and maybe following along, or even not taking a conscious choice? So one of the things I used to do was I was so carefree and, I was pretty easygoing. So I wouldn't even make a conscious choice. People would say, what do you want to do? My husband said, where do you want to go? And I'd say, oh, I don't mind, wherever you want to go. Because I actually used to think, I don't care. And maybe I didn't care, but the fact that I was not making a decision for myself really meant that my self-esteem again and my sense of self-worth was being undermined. I was not showing myself that I was of value, that I was of worth by those little things. And as soon as I started making a conscious choice, as soon as I started to think I'm going to make a statement about where I want to go, even if I didn't really care, that really started to empower me. So in our relationships, if you can imagine, being a people pleaser might also mean I place myself as a very low priority. Now, I noticed this in a lot of women's situations where they have been a mother and a wife, and they have been so used to meeting everybody's needs for so long and not leaving any space for their own, that they get to a point where they're incredibly unfulfilled. They don't feel any sense of worth or value. They feel unimportant, disrespected, not heard, not seen. And why wouldn't they? Because they have set up a situation unconsciously in which they are not a priority in everybody else's mind because they're not a priority to themselves. People pleasing comes along with all of these other factors that it's sort of like is like this spider web, this like octopus of tentacles. And really there is a core source that you can actually shift that changes all of that. So rather than going and changing all of these behaviors, people pleasing, acting from obligation, saying yes when you want to say no, saying no when you want to say yes, all of those things, rather than dealing with those things, they are just the manifestation of something going on inside of you where you are not acting and living from your natural state, your authentic state. So when you come back and resolve that issue, so many of these things actually dissolve and fall away. But back to people pleasing. And in fact, that is why you haven't been able, perhaps if you tried, to change your behavior of people pleasing, because you've been trying to change the behavior, which is the manifestation of the state of being. Hear that again. When you try to change the manifestation or the consequence of being in a certain state of being, then you don't actually resolve the issue because you're not going to the core. You're not dealing with it at its source. So we want to deal with it at its source so these behaviors don't manifest out. And that is exceptional news because you may feel incredibly disheartened, overwhelmed, powerless over people pleasing. It may be something that you believe that you are. However, I would like to suggest to you that it is just something that has been added to you on your journey. So if you can imagine when you were born, you were this beautiful, whole, loving being of just allowance. You look at any child and you can see how present they are. You were that too at birth and probably soon after. And you are still that now. It's just that as you've grown up and had experiences and you've had hurts and pains and, you know, perhaps trauma, you've added to who you are and probably started to believe that these things or these behaviors and these patterns are who you are, but they actually aren't. And when we can start to identify that, we can really start to dissolve dynamics because we don't want to live in a dynamic if we value our freedom. Any dynamic keeps us trapped in a cage. It keeps us doing the repetitive behaviors again and again and again. And we try to fix the behavior, but because we haven't actually dealt with the dynamic that is resultant from this core situation, this core state of being, then we really don't find long-term relief. And I think that is one of the things about people pleasing, is that you might think to yourself, like I once did, I have done so much work on this. I know why I'm a people pleaser. I know why I'm a good girl. I know, I understand. These are all behaviors that are created as a child. Why then do I find myself doing this again in a situation where I just don't want to do it? And think about how this feels to your body, right? So you know, in the moment you might not know you're people pleasing. In the moment, you might not be able to stop yourself, but it doesn't take very long for you to realize that your body feels constricted. It doesn't feel good because your behavior is one of fear. It's a fear-based behavior. It causes restriction, as opposed to if I am in my authentic state and I speak my truth with love and kindness, there's an expansive feeling. So when I think about how my body is impacted by people-pleasing behavior, it's very encouraging for me to really start to implement change at a much deeper level so that I can resolve that behavior completely. And if you also think that you can use your body, like if you're not aware of people-pleasing at the time, start to pay more attention to your body, because you will feel the restriction that your body, the reaction your body has to your behavior, you will feel it. Whenever you're in reaction, your body feels restricted. It feels like and sometimes it might feel like torture. It feels like you're in a bit of a cage. But whenever you're in creation, there's a feeling of expansion and freedom. So if you ever want to know And if you ever want to really start to look at your life and free yourself in your life, moment to moment, become aware of how your body's feeling. Are you creating? Are you in expansion? The thoughts that you're having, are they creating expansive feelings in your body, or are they creating, restriction, in which case perhaps your thoughts are based on fear and they are a reaction to circumstances. So all of these are opportunities for you to take back your power. And that to me is the same as people pleasing. Very simply, when you change your state of being at the core, you will find that these behaviors just dissolve. I never looked at people pleasing and went, I have to stop being a people pleaser. Instead, I changed what was happening in my heart. Actually, I started to develop the qualities of my heart. I started to take back my power. I began to stand in the truth of who I was. And I did start to learn I had to learn how to communicate differently. But as a result of me changing my state of being, I didn't have to run these behaviors anymore. I had rid myself of the reasons and the causes that I found myself running those behaviors in the first place. So people pleasing is absolutely something that can be dissolved very easily. It is something that you can start right now by looking at, that when you're people pleasing, you're doing that from a state of feeling powerless. You're probably doing it from a state of, and have a look at this. You might have an expectation of that person. You might have a hidden agreement. I will do this for you to please you, and in return, I will get what is it that you want from them. So have a very good look, and I would suggest this is your first step. Investigate what the hidden agreement is. Investigate what emotional needs I expect to get met by people pleasing. And then my job is to start to actually meet my own emotional needs. So have a look at that. Find out what exactly is going on, because the truth is that there is a need, there is a payoff for you in the people pleasing behavior. And the second thing is when I understand myself and understand how to really activate the full power of my heart, I no longer have to run behaviors like that. I want to start identifying where I'm in reaction, which means that I'm in my head and I'm actually reacting from fear, or where I feel more expansive. How can I shift this situation into one where I feel expansive? Because then what I'm doing is I'm adding to the empowerment of my heart. So if you can do those two things and start to really, really, really pay attention to your feelings, get in touch with that and start to investigate the payoff behind people pleasing, you are a fair way there of dissolving this behavior. Stop looking at the behavior. The behavior is not the problem. It is a manifestation of an inner state that needs to be shifted. And this is so important right now, because it is so time for people to take back their true power, step into their true nature, and live life from a heart that actually expresses love as a given all of the time. Sending you love.